The neighborhood of New Brighton in Ramsey County, Minnesota, is not known for its violent crime. It is a family community, safe and quiet. Yet on the evening of May 5th, 2014, when gunshots rang out across Knollwood Drive, local residents were not exactly shocked. It seemed that everyone had been holding their breath for something to break the growing tension. A feud between two neighboring households had become a fixture of the charming suburb for years. What had begun as a minor disagreement had spiraled out of control. And on the night of May 5th, the tensions would finally boil over and end with murder. Hi everyone, I'm Kevin and welcome to Just Thought Lounge. Today we're taking a look at a neighborly dispute, which escalated into a tragedy. It ended up destroying more than one family. This isn't a whodunit, but as is so often the case, the motivation behind this crime is questionable. Was this a murder of revenge, of pure anger, or perhaps self-defense? Let's take a look. It was 8:30 p.m. on May 5th, 2014, on the otherwise quiet street in New Brighton, Minnesota. The sound of gunshots rang out. No less than 32 shotgun pellets were unleashed across suburban Knollwood Drive, flying from one family home towards another. It was a devastating, yet remarkably predictable development in a dispute that had been raging amongst neighbors on the street for years. From inside her living room, 48-year-old Jennifer Devereaux-Clevin, suffering from gunshots to her abdomen, rang 911. Her partner Todd Stevens had also been shot. Todd had collapsed outside of their house and was not moving. By the time that the call was placed, the gunshots had finally ceased.
911, where's your emergency?
Hurry, the neighbor just shot both of us. Hurry!
You need an ambulance?
I've been shot, yes! You think he killed Todd? Hurry!
Is the other person, is he awake?
I can't go out there. He might shoot me again. He's laying at the front of the house.
He's laying down outside?
Yes, hurry!
Okay. Where are you hit?
My God, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm bleeding. I'm worried about Todd. You think he killed him?
All right, well, I need to worry about you, okay? Find a clean, dry cloth or towel and put pressure on wherever you're bleeding, okay?
I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die.
Help is coming. Where is the person who did this? Did he run? Did he leave?
The street.
Jennifer, listen, I need to know the name of the person that did this.
Neil Zumberg.
Jennifer's neighbor, Neil Zumberg, had threatened her and Todd in the past. In fact, she had obtained a restraining order against the 57-year-old a year before. This step had obviously not been effective. It had not kept her safe. As emergency responders arrived on scene and began attempting to revive Todd, Jennifer called out to them. The anger and frustration in her voice was palpable. Jennifer raged at the New Brighton Police Department for failing to protect her.
I've got a shotgun. He's shooting, shot 5 times in my head. I've called you guys 100 times. He's never done nothing to me. Oh my God, I told you guys he was gonna kill us. Is he dead? Is he dead, please?
Try to help him.
Help him, I'm shot too. I told you guys. You wouldn't protect me.
While Jennifer was rushed to the hospital, responders did everything they could to assist Todd Stevens. Less than 10 minutes after their arrival, however, the paramedics were forced to admit defeat. Todd had been hit with 3 of the 4 shots fired, mostly in his torso. The damage he sustained was beyond medical intervention. The 46-year-old father was declared dead at the scene. Meanwhile, the shooter, Neil Zumberg, still armed with his shotgun, watched from his home just across the street. New Brighton police, soon to be joined by the Ramsey County Sheriffs and the BCA, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, remained cautious. If Neil remained armed and resisted arrest, the situation could escalate. Fortunately for everyone, Neil Zumberg was not preparing for a standoff against law enforcement. From inside his home, he too placed a call to 911.
911, what's your emergency?
Someone shot outside my house.
Okay,
The police.
they need an ambulance?
I'm sure they do. I'm not going to shoot the police. They can go help the guy.
Are you the one that did the shooting?
I'm not going to say anything.
Is there anybody else in the house with you?
No, my wife has nothing to do with it. I told her to get the hell out of the house.
Who's the guy that's
Nobody-
outside?
Todd Stevens. Nobody listens to me around here. I told the guy that he's going to shoot us. He's got guns. And I've had it. I just had enough.
Neil's 911 call lasted 30 minutes in total. The dispatcher eventually handed off the call to a commander who continued to arrange a surrender to the Ramsey County sheriffs.
I'm not surrendering to the New Brighton police.
Okay, where is the gun that's in the house right now?
Well, what difference does that make?
Because I just want to make sure officers know so that it doesn't endanger you.
Well, you don't care about me.
I hear it. We don't want anything to happen to you.
I'm not going to shoot at the police. I'm not surrendering to the New Brighton police either. They're a bunch of kooks.
So who would you surrender to?
I don't know, Ramsey County Sheriff?
So you will surrender to a Ramsey County sheriff?
Yeah.
Neil had been alone in the house. Following the gunshots, Neil's wife, Paula, had gotten into her car and drove away from the scene.
Chief Jacobson, thanks for being with us. Can you confirm that the deaths were a couple, a man and a woman?
That's right. We have one death. It's an adult male. We received a call about 8:30 tonight of two people who were shot by a neighbor. Our police officers responded to the scene. They found one adult male who had been shot and was deceased. And we also have one adult female who has been shot. She has survived that. She is at HCMC right now as we speak. Yes, there has been a dispute ongoing in this neighborhood between these two neighbors, so we have been here before.
Not only had local law enforcement been called out to Knollwood Drive before, in the 9 years prior to this incident, the New Brighton police had responded to complaints between Jennifer and Todd Stevens and the Zumberg household a total of 44 times. Sadly, other neighbors on the street were disturbed, but not shocked by the shooting.
It's been an ongoing feud between the two, and they live directly across the street from each other, so I figured something eventually was going to happen.
The quiet neighborhood of New Brighton, Minnesota, may be a suburb of the Twin Cities, but it is also close to nature. The community is near to a nature trail and Rice Creek, where walkers can spot wild turkeys, deer, and other wildlife. The 2500 block of Knollwood Drive in New Brighton had been home to Jennifer Clevin and long-term partner Todd Stevens for over 15 years. There, the two had raised their respective children. By the spring of 2014, their children had all left home. The two were ready to embrace a quieter life together. The couple often enjoyed relaxing with a few drinks in their yard, watching the deer and other wildlife gather. Back in 1997, Jennifer and Todd welcomed new neighbors. Neil and Paula Zumberg relocated from northeast Minneapolis, seeking better schools for their children. One of their sons, Jacob, had been diagnosed dyslexic and required a different educational approach. At first, the two families got on well. The children played at each other's homes. They mingled at neighborhood barbecues and shared rides to the state fair. Over the years, however, the relationship deteriorated. Jacob Zumberg was instructed by his parents to no longer spend time with his friend Ryan at the Clevin Stevens home. Todd's drinking habits had become a concern for the Zumbergs, who perceived his behavior when he was drinking to be inappropriate. Neil Zumberg believed there to be domestic, occasionally abusive issues at his neighbor's home and did not want his children exposed to it. Tensions between the two households only escalated from there. Police found Neil's shotgun inside the house exactly where he eventually told them it would be. The weapon was a semi-automatic. Neil had used the 12 gauge to spray a total of 32 pellets towards Jennifer and Todd. 8 of them were removed from his body. Jennifer's wounds to the abdomen were serious, but not life-threatening. The following day from her hospital bed, Jennifer spoke with investigators from the BCA. She explained how the violent dispute with her neighbors had begun. Years earlier, she said, they began to argue over deer.
You know what this is over? Because we feed deer.
Jennifer explained to the investigators that roughly 2 years earlier, in 2012, Neil had become frustrated about the corn left out to feed deer on their yard. That year, Neil circulated a letter to the neighborhood expressing his concerns. In it, he called Todd Mr. Corn and outlined the risks posed by deer carrying in Lyme disease spreading ticks into the suburb. Lyme disease is a serious illness. It is often transmitted from the bite of a tick carrying the bacteria. Even though birds and not deer are often the carriers of the infection, Neil Zumberg was certain his neighbor's selfish actions would be detrimental to the community's health. He was vindicated, apparently. Only months later, he blamed Todd and Jennifer when he claimed that both he and his dog had indeed contracted Lyme disease. The symptoms, fatigue, muscle pain, joint pain, headaches, and sometimes high temperatures, meant that he needed to take a step back at work. He was forced to decrease his hours. Then, he lost his job entirely. Neil placed the blame for his unemployment, poor health, and suffering finances squarely on his neighbors. Neil's unemployment, from Jennifer's perspective, only escalated the tensions. Jennifer and Todd repeatedly accused Neil Zumberg of blowing an air horn to scare the deer feeding on their yard. Later that same year, dead and mutilated animals began appearing on their property. When Neil Zumberg was confronted by Jennifer about the animals, he threatened to kill her, she said. While talking with another neighbor about the deer, Neil reportedly stated that it would all be over soon.
On the other side of the pine tree is where the deer feeders were, and that's where several deer lay dead one morning.
In response to the rising tensions, Jennifer and Todd did two things. First, they installed a series of security cameras on their property, which largely targeted the Zumberg house across the street. Another captured their driveway to the side, and still another was angled towards the other side of the street approaching their home. Following the camera installation, there were no more animals left on their yard. The second step that Jennifer took was obtaining a harassment restraining order against Neil. He was not permitted to step foot on their property. Neil came to blame Jennifer for his continued failure to find work, because he now had a restraining order on file against him. On April 29, 2014, Jennifer called the New Brighton police and claimed that Neil and Paula's son Jacob, now in his early 20s, had threatened to kill her. Jacob had confronted Todd and Jennifer while out at a local restaurant. Jennifer recounted the incident to police.
He said, my dad is dying of Lyme disease because of you. I said, Jake, he's not dying of Lyme disease. He's walking up and down the trail. He's healthier than I am. He walks his dog 3 times a day. So he started screaming and everything. And they kicked Jake out. And before Jake left, he came over and he shoved Tom back and he came over and he said, I'm going to kill y'all and burn your house down.
Police told Jennifer at that time to call them if she saw Jacob so that they could arrest him. 1 week later, on May 5th, that is exactly what she did. Jennifer saw Jacob at a bar and called the police. Jacob was arrested. He was charged with making terroristic threats and 5th-degree assault.
Well, I don't know how to feel yet. It still ain't really sunk in yet. The kid threatened them and to burn the house down. So then they called the police and had him arrested.
His brother, who was also at the bar, called their mother Paula to tell her about Jacob's arrest. When Jennifer returned home that evening, Paula was at home across the street. She was angry about her son's arrest, and she was waiting.
When I was walking up and Paula, the wife, started walking out. She said, he took my son in jail. I said, Paula, let's talk it over. Todd heard her telling the officer, I said, Todd, go back in. He didn't. And all of a sudden, Neil came out of the corner and started shooting.
When Neil Zumberg sat down to speak with the detectives, he agreed with Jennifer on a single point. Their dispute was, at least in part, about deer. Beyond that, their stories diverged.
All right, Neil, and we'd like to talk to you about what happened tonight, kind of what spurred you on. I'm not in Brighton, I work for state of Minnesota. Okay?
Hell, I just, like I said, I mean, it's not that I just went, oh geez, I'm gonna go kill this guy, just flipped out.
Neil explained that Todd and Jennifer were the problem. He asserted that Todd Stevens habitually urinated on his family's yard, made threats from across the street, and sometimes plowed snow onto the Zumbergs' property. Neil recounted occasions spanning several years when New Brighton police responded to domestic disturbances at their home. He said Todd routinely locked partner Jennifer out of their house. On one occasion, in 2008, police responding to a domestic disturbance shot Todd Stevens with a stun gun. He complained about Todd's drinking, accused him of passing out on his yard with some frequency, and threatening Neil and his family with violence. Most concerning, Neil said, was that Todd was known to carry a handgun. Specifically, Todd held a .38 in the cell phone case worn on his belt, despite not having a license to carry a weapon.
Like every weekend, we gotta go in the house, these guys are getting drunk, and they'd be out there with guns, they carry guns on their sides. The New Brighton police know this.
Jacob's arrest was the last straw for the Zumbergs. When Paula saw Jennifer returning home, she told her husband that she was going outside to give Jennifer a piece of her mind. The women began yelling at each other from across the street.
I saw them pull up, and she goes, I'm gonna go give them a piece of my mind. Next thing you know, they're swearing back and forth. He carries a gun and stuff, and they're screaming and yelling, and I told my wife not to go out there.
At some point during the argument, Todd came out of the house and stood next to Jennifer. Upon seeing Todd leave his house, Neil retrieved his shotgun, went to the basement, climbed through a window, and peered around the corner of the house towards Todd and Jennifer. Camera footage showed Neil peek out from around the corner of his house 5 times.
And I was watching, making sure and that they weren't going to shoot my wife or something. And it just happened.
Did you see anything that made you feel like he was in me?
Well, he had his arms like this, and then he kind of went down like this, and I don't know, I mean, fully automatic, it just kept going off.
He fired 4 shots in quick succession, hitting Todd 3 times and hitting Jennifer once as she ran back into the house. Neil unapologetically told the BCA investigators that he hoped Todd would be all right. He also told them that he had done them a favor.
They should give me a medal here because the police were going over there all the time, right? Because of the domestic stuff. Yeah, just hopefully he's all right. I got the feeling he's not.
After the shots were fired, Paula Zumberg drove from the scene.
How did you react? Did you talk to her? She just flipped out, and I told her to get the hell out of the house. She did. Did she drive him or walk him?
According to Jennifer, Paula was far from shocked by what had occurred. In fact, she claimed that Paula was actively encouraging her husband to fire the weapon. It seemed to Jennifer that Neil and Paula had planned the attack.
And Paula kept telling Neil, shoot, 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 shoot. So I think they had it planned out.
If what Jennifer told the BCA was correct, Paula Zumberg was almost certainly an accomplice in what was potentially a premeditated murder. Neil Zumberg was promptly arrested and charged with attempted murder and first-degree murder. His wife Paula was subsequently charged also for aiding and abetting murder as well as assault. After Jennifer was released from the hospital, she began making her case to the media. It was only 3 months after the shootings when Paula Zumberg went to trial.
Stepped out, we heard this bam! All of a sudden he just started shooting. And I said, run. Todd said, he's got a gun. And Todd ran to right there. And Todd said, he shot me. That's the last words he said. He was still shooting, and the bullets were coming through the house, and the window broke. Todd was laying there, and he just kept shooting and kept shooting. My life is done without him. This place is not a home anymore. It's a death house.
Paula's case was decided by Ramsey County District Judge Leslie Ott Merrick. The trial was a short one. The state's case rested on essentially 2 factors: that Paula called out to her husband, encouraging the shots as he fired, and the murky camera footage of the incident. The footage has no audio, but it does show Paula standing in place as a shotgun is fired at her back. She does not drop to the ground. She does not run for cover. The state argued her response was unnatural, unless, of course, she had anticipated the gunshots. They argued that she knew exactly what her husband was doing. Following the presentation of the surveillance video, the proceedings came to a surprising end after Paula Zumberg's lawyer, Gary Wolf, told the judge that neither she nor her husband would take the stand in the defense's case. Wolf argued that Jennifer lied on the witness stand and was acting out of vengeance by accusing Paula of telling her husband to keep shooting at them. They pointed out that Jennifer had made no mention of Paula's behavior on the night of the shooting, but rather added those details to her account the following day. Paula's DNA was not found on any of the shotgun shells or the gun itself. Only Neil's was. Even if she had yelled out to shoot, there was no proof that Neil Zumberg would have heard her over the loud gunshots. Nor was there any evidence that the state could produce showing that Paula knew ahead of time that her husband was going to open fire on May 5th. Paula was acquitted of all charges. She was sent home. Paula had spent 100 days in county jail. Later that year, Neil Zumberg also went to trial. His case would be heard by a jury. The defense argued that Neil's actions were in self-defense. The jury heard about threatening behavior by both neighbors to each other over the years, which included death threats. Witnesses testified to seeing gun gestures that Todd Stevens made with his hand towards the Zumberg's property. Neil took the stand in his own defense. He testified that after he learned of the confrontation between his son Jacob and his neighbors on the 29th of April, he had parked a block from his home and entered his house through a window out of fear for his safety. Concerned that hostilities would escalate further, he retrieved a 12-gauge shotgun from his basement and taught his wife Paula how to use it. He then loaded the gun with 4 shells, each containing 8 pellets of buckshot, removed the trigger lock, and placed the gun under the living room couch. When Jennifer returned home that night, Paula went outside to confront her. Neil watched the confrontation through the living room window. As the argument escalated, he retrieved the shotgun and snuck outside. From his position at the side of his house, roughly 145 feet away from where Paula was arguing with Todd and Jennifer, he saw Todd threaten his wife. In an unexpected development, the defense team argued that because Neil had grown up with a deaf younger brother, the 57-year-old had learned at an early age to read lips. After about 1 minute using his apparent lip-reading skills, Neil testified that he thought he saw Todd say, "I'm gonna kill that." Neil said that he saw Todd reach for his belt where he had known him to carry a gun. Then he raised his shotgun. It just kept going off, he said. Neil testified that he intended to stop Todd Stevens and did not intend to hurt Jennifer Clevin at all. Todd Stevens was found to have a phone holder attached to his belt. but he was not armed when Neil Zumberg shot and killed him. Jurors began their deliberations at 11 a.m. following closing arguments. They returned verdicts by 2 p.m. the same day, even after fitting in an hour lunch break.
And it is guilty on all 4 counts against Neil Zumberg for the May 2014 killing of his neighbor.
An alternate juror stated later that they could not reconcile how Neil had been able to see Todd clearly enough to read his lips, but so poorly that he also believed his cell phone was a gun.
A reasonable person, if they think that their wife is in imminent danger, would have ran out of the house, the front door, screaming, saying, "Get back, get over here. I think he has a gun." He didn't do any of them.
Also, it appeared from the camera footage that Todd Stevens had his arms crossed at the time that the gunshots were fired. He did not appear to be reaching for anything. At his sentencing hearing, Neil Zumberg left the court with one last surprise. He admitted to perjuring himself on the stand. In a 20-minute speech, Neil spoke of the happy times that he had shared with his neighbors before the feud began. He apologized to Jennifer and the rest of Todd's family. "I want Todd's family to know how deeply sorry I am for the pain I've caused them. If I could trade places with Todd, I would. I'm sorry. Todd did not deserve to die." Neil claimed to have been coached by his lawyer to give false testimony. He could not read lips. He did not genuinely believe that Todd was reaching for a gun when he opened fire. Neil was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The judge handed him an additional 15 years for the attempted murder of Jennifer Devereaux Clevin.
All I can say to him is, I don't forgive you, I never forgive you, and I hope you rot in hell.
Paula Zumberg sold the family home on Knollwood Drive to fund her husband's legal defense. Looking back, Paula Zumberg told a local news outlet that the family should have moved away years earlier, as her husband had once considered. But she said, "This could happen to anybody. I can't think of anything we could have done to change it." And that was the tragic case of Jennifer Clevin and Todd Stevens. If you like how we presented this case, then please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on our latest videos. I'm Kevin, this is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.